Distinguidas amigas, distinguidos amigos.
Distinguished friends, after that necessary break, I see that we're all happy to come back. The fine Ecuadorian coffee is fantastic for such purposes. As I said before the break, our last speaker is Mr. Omar Al Kaddour. He is a member of the Argentine Consensus for Palestinian-Israeli Peace in Buenos Aires. Mr. Kaddour served as a consultant in the Senate of the nation and the Chamber of Deputies, as well as for the President of the Commission on Foreign Affairs, advising on international security. He is also a Human Development Coordinator at the Fundación Contemporánea. We are awaiting your presentation, sir. You have the floor. Thank you, Chairman. Thanks to all of my colleagues as well on the panel. I should like to at this time thank the Chairman of the Committee, Abdul Salam Diallo, and Wolfgang Grier as well, the Director of the Division. I thank you for your deeds. I thank you for being who you are. I should like to also commend the entire UN team, the staff that have been charged with organizing this international event. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. I also thank Ecuador. I thank the civil servants of the Ecuadorian government for so much hospitality. I should like to also express my appreciation for and hail the company of Ambassadors Mansour and Al-Sevin, the ambassador in Ecuador, representing the state of Palestine. I admire in them the sacrifices that they've made and their commitment, their devotion and love that they have for their homeland, which is our homeland as well. Whether it's because of the faith that defines us, or in my case, because I am an Arab. I have a face and the surname that are Arab, and this is DNA really. I'm happy to be an Arab, and I'm happy to represent the Arab community in Argentina. I should also like to thank the representatives of the diplomatic corps. I should like to thank everyone here. Thank you for your company today, during these meetings, yesterday as well. I should like to share with you my pleasure at having us all met for Palestine and for peace in this so very important year. Thanks to one and all. I'm going to speak of other topics, but I should like to underscore my cousin's thoughts, Mariela. We were speaking and we define ourselves as cousins. First cousins. But there are some cousins that aren't necessarily Jews or Arabs, but that join the consensus anyway. Juan is one of them, and he participates in the consensus with all of us. And in his case, in Uruguay, he's Creole. So there's a reference also to second cousins that join us in these citizen diplomacy venues, as Mariela had said. But I want to add it to what Mariela said. We fully agree with the two-state solution. All of us that make up this consensus in its different manifestations, there's Chilean, Peruvian, Uruguayan, Argentine, side by side in Brazil. We also agree with the stances that are brought to the negotiating table by the Palestinians, in particular with regard to the withdrawal of the settlers from the settlements and a possible solution for the refugees, and a balance in managing with the water supply These are matters of constant consumption, if you will. We discuss these all the time. There's absolute agreement on these topics. So we would like to transmit that. We would like to convey that. Our agreement on this is total. It's foundational. This agreement in stances vis-a-vis this situation and peace, concrete political stances, all of this allows us to move forward in other conversations and other matters that are of interest to us so that we can work from where we are toward peace. I'm going to divide my presentation into 3 sections. I didn't look at the watch, but I will try to be brief. I'll explain how I've divided my presentation into 3 sections. First, I'm going to talk about what I am. I'm a man of Arab origin. I'm not going to say a young man, although many continue to call us young. I am an Arab man. I am a free man who teaches peace and civil society as my area of action. I tried to find a culture of gathering, of meeting together. And we insist very much on this idea of building a culture of meeting together, of coming together, a pedagogy of rapprochement, of closeness, proximity, and being concerned with each other and for each other. We're friends evermore. We eat together. We break bread together. We share family information. I'm an activist. I'm a peace activist. And I believe that when the time comes, we will find that so yearn for peace. The first part of my presentation refers to the actions that we undertake in CAPI, in our group, the Consensus. It's the Argentine Consensus for Palestinian-Israeli peace. I'm going to try to be concrete and pithy, and then we can have questions perhaps at the end. We meet once a month approximately. Sometimes we have difficult agendas to align, but we do meet once a month for the most part. We have a movie library also. It provides material that nourishes our conversations and debates, our discussions. Near the end of last year, we held a workshop in CAPI. It's focused on multi-track diplomacy. And that's where we did this where our Argentine diplomats are trained. This was in the foreign ministry in Argentina. Eddie was there, Walid Salem, professor as well from Al-Quds, Mariela, myself, Paulo, Ignacio. This was the team that is most frequently working with the Consensus project. We were the ones that offered the workshop on multi-track diplomacy. For the civil servants that are focusing on formal diplomacy, state diplomacy, sometimes these proposals seem to them it's something that they have to get used to, this idea of multi-track diplomacy that we're offering. We have to move from our citizen diplomacy in a way that contributes to the official state diplomacy. We offered complementary techniques to official diplomacy. And that the idea was to contribute to their efforts. It was a very positive experience. Another situation that I'm going to share with you was that in December of 2012, in January of 2013, in the Consensus itself, we link our work with civil society, different parts of civil society, we link with different parts of the foreign ministry and different parts of the legislative power, the legislative branch, different areas of the government. We link our work in civil society with the government nationally. Why do we do this? Well, we do it to transmit this idea of how the public, the people, the citizens are committed and involved in the matter of Palestine and in the matter of peace. And so in December of 2012 and January of 2013, we had conversations with different civil servants, even the vice minister, and we were able to bring to the presidency a plan of action that would channel through UNASUR actions aimed at building peace between Palestine and Israel. One of the most outstanding actions, there are many of our actions that we took, but one of the most important was that of organizing a high-level conference at the ministerial level, foreign affairs ministers, and if we could have presidents and ministers as well, all the better. So it would be a high-level conference aimed at Palestinian-Israeli peace. From above, moving downward with heads of state, and the idea was to propose this conference and organize also a ground-up conference instead of just the conferences from the top down. A dialogue among people, the idea being to bring consensus within UNASUR. We were working toward that. We made the proposal, the idea being to bring it to the Palestinian authorities later as well as the Israeli authorities. The initiative at that time did not prosper. There were different reasons for that. There were different policies in place at the time that made it so. Different policies in place between Brazil and Argentina. And this topic was taken off the agenda. That's basically what happened. There's supposed to be a meeting between the presidents of Argentina and Brazil. We wanted for that meeting between Cristina and Dilma to happen, and it didn't happen. And it was postponed. And then I think we saw the death of Chavez afterwards. There was supposed to be a meeting among the presidents. The death of Chavez postponed it. And then there were exchanges during 6 hours in which they were working on topical matters, trade issues, bilateral relations, instead of focusing on regional strategies. And that was the challenge that we were putting forth. We wanted to have a proposal in UNASUR that was consensus-based, at least on our levels in Brazil and Argentina, and bringing that to UNASUR to generate action on that level. That story could be much longer, but I'll stop there with that idea. Another activity that we're looking at in the future within the consensus is having a parliamentary visit from Argentines, from the Chamber of Deputies perhaps, also senators, from the Foreign Affairs Committee in our legislature. This initiative is taking shape right now. We had an invitation from the Knesset, the group of parliamentarians that addressed the Arab initiative, as Judy had mentioned, those who are most open to dialogue. That's who the visit would be with. And to discuss this initiative for Arab-Israeli peace. Argentina has a long track record in human rights, and I think that's cross-cutting, if you will. Cross-cutting in these visits. I think that along these lines there is much to share. There's much to share with our brothers or cousins in the occupied territories. Lastly, some weeks ago, I participated with the Religious Dialogue Institute, the Institute for Interreligious Dialogue, rather, in Argentina. They coordinate together between a member of the Islamic community, a rabbi, a priest. We traveled to Palestine and Israel, to the Holy Land. We met with civil servants. We met with members of parliament. We met with the Prime Minister of Palestine. We met with the Latin Patriarch in Jerusalem, and we ended up in Rome in a meeting with the Holy Father, with the Pope. This was a great experience. It was novel, as far as we understand. We were told that it was a unique event. it was an event that was political in some respects, but also filled our spirits. We had some 45 individuals, Jews among them, Muslims, Christians as well, Christians of different stripes, Orthodox, Protestants, etc. It was a great experience. There were 15, 15, and 15. We divided up into 3 equal groups to bring balance among the 3 groups. Eddie mentioned something as well that I will close my first section on our activities with, because I could spend my entire time allotted to me speaking about this. But there's a concept that we work with a great deal in the consensus. Sometimes we take one step in this direction, one step with one foot, one step with the other. We bring balance in our work. For example, the balance in the makeup, the membership of the consensus, and the amount of people and who's present. When we put together agendas as well. When we look at our agenda in the Holy Land, in Palestine, in Israel, we try to bring this balance. We try to strike this balance. If we go to see the Prime Minister of Palestine, or the President rectifies the Speaker of Palestine, we try to do the same with Israel. If we go to Knesset in Israel, we try to go to the Palestinian legislature as well. We try to keep this balance whenever possible on all fronts. And this actually affords us a good deal of freedom. If someone attempts to criticize this citizen diplomacy effort, we say no. We work on both sides of this. We bring balance in our work. My cousin here reminds me that this gives us legitimacy. And when we try to meet with civil servants and call upon them to understand the reality in Israel and the reality in Palestine, so that they could know more, when we reach out to them, this frees them up as well, because there's no bias. And this balance allows them to trust that while we are an informal organization, the consensus that is, we do have balance in all regards.
And then the second issue or topic that I wanted to talk about was sort of hypothetical, and since it's hypothetical, it's refutable. In other words, you could say yes, I'm right or not, and I'm open to discussion on this. Sharing everything that was said already in the Bureau, I'd just like to focus my remarks in an area that's less traditional in terms of official diplomacy or the system of the United Nations, etc. And here I'd like to make a comment on international policy. I should say that I specialized and studied international relations, so I have a comment on that. The panel in this international conference, it's a small comment, but there's an important element in this international arena, which is also multi-track diplomacy, and that figure is the Pope Francis. There hasn't been a lot of reference to him, but one can clearly visualize action within the international system, and it's novel, it's positive. A leader who's very positive, and his appearance on the global scene is awakening the most noble desires, the desire to live better, to live next to each other. And the other is just a statistic. And that's what's novel, and what's good in his message. And since it's hypothetical, as I said, you can refute me. How do you refute what's novel about this new leadership? The most important political issue that came out of the G20 meeting was the letter sent by the Pope, he didn't participate, to Putin, Vladimir Putin about the conflict in Syria and the resulting response from Putin, and Obama coordinating their action in order to mitigate the Syrian conflict and avoid military involvement. Now, we could discuss that politically, but it was a very specific action, and it did take place. So I thought that was what was most noteworthy. Also, the Pope proposed having a day of prayer for all the faithful. This is novel because it's working in two different dimensions. The dimension of being, of spirit, and that of action, doing. And through the action, the two leaders, two of the greatest leaders on the planet, were accompanied by action through legitimacy, which arose out of a spiritual event, because in fact they took the action, Putin and Obama, but many of us were praying for that action to take place. In other words, the world praying for peace. Just for a moment, we should engage in the exercise of imagining a similar situation for the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the international community's support in order to achieve a lasting solution. We should not lose sight of the next trip of the Holy Father to the Holy Land, which is planned for May. You will say to me, and no doubt you're right, well, that's all beautiful, but it doesn't really help given all the many latent and active conflicts at a global level. And I would say to you, well, that's true, but the key is the world is in a more brotherly or sisterly world and a more fair world. Those situations would make all the more obvious the fact that people must demand more harmonious action that leads to living better together, to make it a viable alternative for the international community as a policy of deterrence. I see this because I perceive a change in the international community. Desires, hopes, optimism. And I'm amongst those that believes or hopes that a new era is upon us, an era of brotherhood. And perhaps international leaders will be able to take on that mantle. And I say brotherhood or fraternity, as I would say the word love. It's not possible to have projects for peace based only on reason. Reason needs heart and conviction. Love as a higher virtue is a full virtue, more complete. It calls for justice, respect for the law. A person who loves is just, loves peace. A person who loves recognizes the inherent dignity in all human beings. The person who loves recognizes basic human rights and helps all human beings. In love, we recognize each other. There are no differences between us. Love humanizes us. The person who loves thirsts for something greater, love for one's neighbor. The person who loves has a selective memory for that which is good, or for doing good. That's the great challenge of this time. Being, the heart. We must focus on the profound inherent humanism in Judaism, in Islam, and in Christianity in all of its expressions. Protestant, Catholic, conservative, or not. Love is revolutionary and conformist, both at the same time. When a person loves, one is creative, very creative, and finds solutions for every challenge. And that's why we extend this invitation. This invitation, from my point of view, is of a vision of the world and of life, and I identify with that vision. That's how I see Christian humanism. That's what I'm proposing here. I'm making these comments and stress them, but know that this is what the Pope said in visiting the Holy Land in January. These are not just my words. And I'd like to conclude this topic by saying the challenge for the future is to reaffirm this approach. And it's necessary to have a meeting to promote the cultures meeting each other. I'll focus now on a verse which for Christians is held dear to them, that's very important to them. And it's one of the reasons why I work for the grassroots and why I'm committed to this. And it relates to the Sermon of the Mount. When Jesus was preaching, this is based on the Christian tradition, blessed are those who seek peace. They will be called the children of God. What a great desire for the tribes. The tribes ascending to Jerusalem, that is heavenly Jerusalem. It's what motivates me to work for peace. That deep-seated conviction in my heart is what brings me to action, and that's what I'm sharing. It's not traditional to speak this way in these fora, but it's important to me to convey this idea, to convey this sentiment. I wanted to share it with you. I don't know if I have time, but I'd just like to mention that we've written something a bit representative of this consensus, what we call the South American commitment to Palestine-Israeli peace. Do I have a few minutes? I'll be brief. We, citizens of South America, men and women, free, meeting of our own free will and personally, wish for peace between Palestine and Israel as convened by the Consensus for Israeli-Palestinian peace, with a view to tighten our unity for action. We see as a shared vision. We speak of vision and division. The first initiative is a citizen initiative of diplomacy to seek peace so that South Americans and all human beings who wish to work and dream with us can do so. To live together in respect can be enhanced in loving each other and not based on utility. And our civilization believes and trusts in man, in man's intelligence and his desire for development and modernity, evolution. The unity of this space is based on the freedom of consciousness. And vis-a-vis a different person, different beliefs, different conviction, faith, or obligations, peoples end up remaining behind, stuck in violence and in adolescence. All men and women who are good, it's up to them to meet this challenge with a deep and decisive commitment. And thus we decided to not compromise. We work for love, which is not based on calculations, not planned, to promote Palestine and Israel as free and sovereign states, to communicate to the world a message of living together based on a message from abroad in South America. We work for our brothers and sisters to have dignity based on their own work and access to their assets in body and soul, to work through service for the unity and dialogue through the monotheistic religions of the Abraham's descendants. And we work for and desire peace We desire to recognize the dignity inherent in all human beings without distinction of race, creed, or culture, the respect for human rights inherent to all people, to recognize each other as equal, to prefer humanism, and our focus must be on deep humanism as is inherent in all religions, access to a greater good for everyone, to conserve memory, selective memory, to remember what is good and forget what is evil, to find solutions for each challenge in favor of peace, to be fighters, tireless fighters in the service of peace, right, and freedom in the world. And now I speak of the mission. It's a shared mission. It's urgent for the present moment. The mission is to support any peace initiative which is mutually acceptable, shared, and with broad support of civil society, both Palestinian and Israeli, which takes into account the constitution of two sovereign states with Al-Quds and Jerusalem as respective capitals. A lasting and fair peace with recognized and safe borders, the pre-1967 borders with territorial swaps mutually accepted based on shared solutions for other pending issues such as settlements, the due withdrawal of settlements, a possible agreement about refugees, and equitable sharing of water. Support civil society, which is putting great effort into building peace from top to bottom, complementing the efforts of negotiations undertaken at the government level. And finally, we support interreligious processes, demonstrating that in Latin America, Christians, Muslims, and Jews have much in common and are growing in their activity in order to strengthen peace in a region where religious differences have been and are a cause of some of the violence and exclusion that's been experienced. Ecuador, Quito, 26th of March, 2014, the year of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you. Those are some of the ideas that I wanted to share with you. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for exceeding the time allotted to me.
Quiero agradecer al señor Al Kaddour.
I'd like to thank Mr. Al Kaddour. Truly, it was an impressive presentation. And at some point when the times it looked like the world was going to collapse in 2012, the foreign minister said it's not that the world is coming to an end, it's that we're beginning a new era where we will have to leave behind the old world to live. And that's what we're trying to apply here. So don't worry about time. The ideas are what's going to remain. Thank you, Chair, says the Speaker.